Here we go. All righty. It is 9 o'clock and we are welcome. Welcome now, my howdy, my very warm welcome to everyone, especially those joining us for the first time, and those, of course, who are part of our learning community. We're academyEX. We are built for people who think deeply, act boldly, and care about doing work that matters. If that's important to you, then welcome. You are in good company. And this is our quarterly business briefing. It's the second one for 2025. It's a fast-moving tour of what's happened, what's happening, and most fun of all, what our rebel educationalist and future-focused Fancy Pants founder, Frances Valintine, sees coming next. Look, Frances, as you may know, doesn't do boring keynotes, and she certainly doesn't do jargon. She asks big questions, she challenges and the obvious, and pulls the future into the room with us or us into the future. So buckle in, because this is not just a presentation, this is a provocation. So feel free to pop your name, your location, and what you're looking forward to today in the chat. And we are going to begin, as we always do, to open the space with a karakia. Me karakia tato. Ko te kawa oranga, ko te kawa oraro, ko te kawa ora, ko te kawa ora. E rongo e whakairihiria ki runga, turuturu o whiti whakamaua ki a tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Welcome. So we've done our welcome, we've done our opening karakia, we've told you all to buckle up. As we move into the next phase, we are going to hand this over to Frances, but there's just a couple 101s. I know it's been about 5 years since COVID, but yet it feels like just yesterday. So please keep yourself on mute. Use the chat to ask questions, many questions. If they're not answered today, we'll do our best to answer them later. We will be sending you a follow-up email on this one. This will be recorded, so get your funny faces out of the way now, and it will be recorded and distributed. So feel free to bring in your agents and your chatbots. We will be capturing our own notes, so those are the official ones. The ones that you've written up will say or made up and just don't matter. As we go forward, this is, again, I can't tell you how much fun this is going to be. It's our quarterly business big brains meeting, and I think you're all in for a roller coaster of a ride. It's been a bonkers quarter. Let's see what's going to happen next. Frances, it's over to you.
Kia ora, and morning everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this Friday morning, wherever you might be in the world. It has been a bonkers quarter, and I'm going to launch straight into it. We have an hour and a half of information coming your way, and just as a disclaimer beforehand, the information I share comes from reliable sources. I curate it in a way so that we can understand how things come together. It sometimes can be confronting because there is a lot going on, and I will try to expand as much information I can in the time I have, so that you come out of this knowing, with some kind of certainty of where the world is leaning at this stage in this moment in time. And I will hold questions at the end, as Perrin mentioned, and I will go straight into it like a fire hydrant of information, and I look forward to seeing you on the other end. So I'm going to share my screen and get straight into it. I think actually, I'm going to very quickly just shrink you all on my little viewfinder. Sorry, I just need to do this again. Gotcha. Right. Now, I think the first thing to say is we can never get away from artificial intelligence right now. It is absolutely everywhere. The shifts that have happened, we've gone a long way advanced on generative AI, and now moving into agentic AI, which we talked about in the last quarter as the first of those tools started coming out with Operator as part of OpenAI last quarter. And now with a very simple prompt, the things that we could only imagine we could do at a very short time ago can be done in seconds. I've done just this very quick intro here. I'll play in just 1 second with a very quick prompt, asked to create a little AI, and using an AI to create a little animation of a cat as a DJ with some music. And you can see now just within seconds, I can do something like this. New tech, new day. Future work, it's here to stay. Machines and minds. And so there we go, into the session today. Now, I also want to just talk about the advances we have when we've got video prompts coming now. We've got the amount of content now that you can literally just ask what you need, It will create with sound effects and audio, but even very simple things like a photograph of maybe one of your loved children, and actually very easily being now able to, with one click, 1 second, no delay.
Hey, you. Yes, you. I wonder if you could help me work out the world ahead. Any suggestions? It looks a little complex from where I'm standing.
And it's getting very complex. So let's get into it, maybe a little more of the serious side, a little less of the lighthearted side, because we are going into the first really big indication of what AI is going to do to jobs. And the data is coming out, particularly out of the US right now, but it is global data and there is so much of it. It's really hard to bring it into one place. I am going to play this video. It is one of the longer videos of this entire session, but it's a bit of a scene setter about what we're thinking and what's going on in the world of jobs and where are job losses already starting to appear.
Economic Forum, nearly a quarter of all current professions will change in the next 5 years due to AI.
Half of entry-level white-collar jobs disappearing and 10 to 20% unemployment in the next 1 to 5 years.
The tech sector is already being hit, but this will spread to many other sectors of the labor economy.
Tech has already been hit, and other industries are just months away from massive cuts.
Even the CEOs of the largest AI companies in the United States are warning about the potential consequences.
CEO of an artificial intelligence company warns that AI is about to wipe out millions of jobs in the next few years, even calling it a bloodbath.
The effects of this labor revolution could bring significant consequences, potentially leading to unemployment rates never seen before.
It's not just tech. The CEO of a major AI company says could wipe out half of all the white-collar starter jobs, possibly causing unemployment to soar as high as 20%.
So how could AI eliminate nearly half of all white-collar jobs? The accelerated advancement of artificial intelligence is transforming the global job market in unprecedented ways. What was once limited to repetitive manual tasks or data processing has now evolved into tools capable of executing complex cognitive functions that were historically the responsibility of entry-level administrative workers.
So cognitive or complex cognitive changes are happening. So this is not ChatGPT. And what we're moving away from is this generative AI. And I do want to just go through the differences between what you may be playing with, like here with ChatGPT, there are 3 versions, and when you ask a request versus when you're going now into agentic AI. So let's just do a little quick, everybody knows this, but I'm going to show it. This is a request I've asked of ChatGPT to create a report on how agentic AI will affect the education system. This is the years 1 through 13 within Aotearoa, New Zealand. I've asked it, and I start the prompt like I always do with, I want to do this. This is the information I'm looking to secure. What questions do you need me to answer? So going through that, it asks questions. I then go back and give more information in response to those questions. And then it comes up with writing the report, so the first draft. Now, all of this is familiar to you. So it's now thinking about what it needs to do, and this is in real time. Now, in those days, say even 3-4 months ago, we would have been probably fairly happy with this little executive summary going across what might needed to be in this report, the introduction, the information that's coming through. Quite lightweight, very much bullet points. It's almost like almost a table of contents in a way. It certainly doesn't give you a huge amount of information. It does have a few little things around what you might have in terms of glossary of terms and other references, and then next steps about you might want to do literature reviews and other things such as data collection. Very basic. And if people stopped at this point and thought there's no way that this whole new AI world is going to change things, you'd be right, because if we stopped at this point, it would be very limited. And so I can go back and ask it to expand the report, but I'm still going to get a pretty limited report in this space. If I take that exact same prompt and put it into a tool like Manus, which is a Chinese-based tool, which is not a large language model per se, it's an overlay across multiple large language models. I can put the same prompt to create the same report. And when it goes into it, it operates like an agent. It says, all of the things you need, I will start looking for them simultaneously. I will start thinking about what you need for the information, where the information could come from, where the source of information, how it would be contextualized within whatever environment you're talking about. It thinks in a different way. Now, this is actually a very long video, and I'm not going to play it all. And in fact, I've already compressed it down. The entire process from beginning to end And the same request that took just 1 or 2 minutes within ChatGPT took 25 minutes within Manus. And what you start to see is it's starting to go, okay, I can see I'm ready to create this report for you. Would you like me to start by conducting research and drafting an outline? So it's starting to say, where do you think we should start? And let's figure this out. So I'm saying, yes, I want you to start with the research. I want you to start thinking about the outline of this very important report to go out to schools about the impact of agentic AI. Now, again, I'm going to play just a little bit of this video because I think it's super important that you understand the difference. You see it's starting to look at education.gov.nz, looking for guidance across the Ministry of Education. It's starting to think about the sources of where logical information might come about. It needs to know what's going on in the New Zealand school system. It needs to know what government might be thinking about it. It needs to understand teaching and learning in context. And sitting in this space right now, you can see it's now going into NZQA for guidance on AI and assessments. And so I'm going to speed along this journey. So over the next roughly 20 minutes, it goes through multiple different sources and it tells you exactly what it's looking at and where it's getting information from. At any point also, you'll see this, it has a little taskbar that you can pop into, and it has there one of 7 things it's looking at, and it's still working on the first one, which is the research mode in AI and education landscape with New Zealand specific content. Below it, you'll see it's going to gather lots of other information more broadly, risks and writing reports and looking at academic research, etc. And so on it goes. So I'm going to just keep scrolling. It gives these little updates, it gives some information, it gives you basically the areas it's going to focus on, continues on, and then as we move through the period of 25 minutes, if it was in real time, I now have a report. Now, you'll see this report now is 96 pages. It also has a glossary and appendix of over 250 links to research. It has contextualized, it brings in utility, it talks about context of Aotearoa, it brings in all the risks and opportunities. This report, if I took this and I gave this to the Ministry of Education or to any principal of an education organisation, they would find this incredibly useful and it would absolutely give them the information it needs. Now, again, we're not going to go through this whole report, but the difference is what I want you to understand in the 3 months since we last connected between what generative AI does and what agentic AI does. So this agentic AI is creating a new boom because not only are agentic AI being developed in the US and China, where Amanus came from, we're starting to see this idea that organizations are starting to understand they don't need to just build large language models, but instead they can build these agents right across them and pull information from multiple sources. And actually that's in terms of where users are going to go, this is the space we're all going to land, is have these agents who do work for us. And I'll just show you a few other ones that are coming out of China. And this is a really interesting one called GenSpark. And what I like about this one is it also gives you the ability to integrate all your Google Suite. So it will give you a rundown on your day, your emails, what priorities you need to do. You could go in and looking into your drives. So if you're a Google kind of environment, on top of everything else it does, including making slides and presentations and everything else you would imagine, this is a great way of seeing how the future is starting to pan out. Another one here, Floeth, another Chinese version. I've put a little prompt here around creating an event plan for the launch of a new flower company, which is Flowers as a Service, based here in Auckland in New Zealand. And I've asked it to create the invite list, themes, etc., the event caterers, styling, the budget, the management, staffing, etc. Now, the difference again, compared to what you would see in a traditional generative AI, it starts to operate again like an agent. It's doing multiple different things and starting to build this comprehensive plan, thinking about who your invite list might be, your social media, your methodologies, your theming, etc. And so it continues on and starts to give you information that is doing multiple tasks, not a narrow field like a generative AI, but much more broadly, including things like budget management. Now, I just also want to keep going here and show as I go back and ask them to say, okay, these are all services are wonderful. Can you now provide me service providers? And you'll start to see here, it's telling me options, venues, tasting room, the Auckland Art Gallery, different beverages, decoration and styling people. So if you're thinking about this is actually giving you now information about businesses. And even though it's gone through no form of search engine optimization like a Google, which brings us to what does happen to search engine optimization when more and more people are going to go to agents? And of course, even within the likes of ChatGPT and Perplexity, we're starting to see that they were actually giving information and acting like a search engine. So now SEO is becoming GEO, or generative engine optimization, and we're starting to see that going through into the investment market. So 6 deals in the first part of this year in 2025 have already been backed, and you'll see the Y Combinator back Athena HQ. It surpassed 1 million AI responses in May, so just last month. We're starting to see these companies get investment across some traditional investment areas. So we are moving away SEO, GEO, and what does that mean for all the people who've been paying for AdWords to have their rankings within search engine optimization in Google, and people who have been paying for people who optimize search as a whole industry in itself? That whole market is going to be changing right in front of our eyes. And so while we have all these companies moving into these new forms of agentic AI, you've got some of the more traditional tech companies, the tech giants like Meta, who are starting to realize that actually maybe that are being left behind, and particularly being left behind by some of the Chinese alternatives. So one of the ways that they're playing catch up is actually investing in some other AI companies. And this deal has just been done. So Meta, or Facebook, buying a 49% stake in a startup called Scale AI. Now, Scale AI is given to give them a lot of capability they didn't have. And I think what's really interesting about this is a startup, and they're spending $15 billion on it. Now, there has never been a history in the world where $15 billion is a startup. So much so that that startup and one of its founders, Lucy Gale, is now surpassed Taylor Swift in terms of the wealthiest female on the planet. And here she is, this self-proclaimed roller skating kind of, technology kind of entrepreneur. So she, when she co-founded the firm when she was just 21 a few years ago, has now become this super kind of rich, but also highly successful because of the back of seeing early and advancing on AI before potentially some of the bigger companies got there and doing great things. Now, they go from sort of local and company and big tech giants, and then we start to looking at what happens at a country political level. So recently, most of you would have seen Trump went off to the Middle East to do some deals in the UAE. Here is one of the outcomes of that deal. So OpenAI are now partnering, and they're actually bringing this what's called Stargate to the United Arab Emirates. And what that does is it's bringing sort of huge amounts of supercomputing, both back from the Middle East into the US, building these partnerships and actually building capability. One of the really interesting parts about this is the first of one of 10 deals that OpenAI want to do with getting an entire country's population to have free subscription to ChatGPT, which is now rolling out with this deal. But there's also just so much more with this, because on the backside of this, the UAE have committed to invest $1.4 trillion into the US to create job creation and economic growth so that the US can have its technological leadership. So the politics of what's going on around AI are really playing out. It's a bit of a split between the US and China, but there's also many different markets are starting to play and collaborate together as they understand that this is not going away, and actually it's going to have massive implications for economics of all countries, because as the job markets start to soften, as those who understand AI start to actually really harness the benefits and start to get the productivity gains, we're going to start to see quite a different shift in the world. So I'm just going to go jump back into the job market, because there is an abundance of information and reports coming out. Impossible to bring it all together. But you're starting to see some pretty outstanding and quite confronting statements coming out. Here's just one of them.
Today's Wall Street beat because there were fireworks. Vista CEO Robert Smith also in Berlin, warning that, quote, next year, 40% of the people at this conference will have an AI agent, and the remaining 60% will be looking for work. Joining us now, Bloomberg Intelligence senior banking analyst.
So we're looking at information like that, which is just astounding. That conference had 2,500 people in it. Of course, it's pretty confronting when it says that over half the people won't have a job next year. Now, do I believe that? No, probably not to that extreme. However, I think the trajectory of what we imagined is really changing. The World Economic Forum came out and had this report which says, 22% of formal jobs will be impacted by this churn. It's all a 5-year window. We're already halfway through this year. It's a 4.5-year window now. And so we're going to have some new roles emerging. But all those new roles you'll soon see are in this space. People need to understand what AI is going to do, not just the technical skills you need, but how to embed it, how to bring it into companies, how to change systems and processes around AI, and certainly how to bring in these agents. So we also, when we're looking at these reports, I think some key ones here is that the need to upskill is going to be at a level we've never ever seen before. Almost forget about undergrad. Those young people are going to figure this out. They're going to work away and probably change the way they learn away from these traditional degrees. Actually, it's people in the workforce are going to be really challenged. So in the same report from the World Economic Forum, they said if you took a sample of 100 workers, and they would say 59 of those are going to need to be reskilled in the next couple of years, 29 of those will be able to upskill in their current role, but then there's going to be 19 who have to be redeployed in their company, and there's going to be a bunch of people who potentially will be out of a role. Now, these numbers, even if you took a conservative sort of view across all of the data that's coming out, there is an absolute trend of this commitment that companies, as they pick up AI to get the economic and benefits from it and the productivity gains, jobs are at risk. What's also interesting here at the top part of this slide, you'll see that employers recognize that they actually do need to train people, and there's been an upswing. So 50% of the workforce are starting to complete training, compared to 41% 2 years ago. But at the bottom part of the screen, you'll see that actually most employers expect people to self-fund. So this is going to be an onus on the individual to get out there and start to learn. Some other data, this is very US-centric, but I think it's, again, we can start to see, we might have a little more time before these impacts happen, but I think we can see here. I'll just explain quickly the top left-hand corner. If you are a new grad from university, and depending on the amount of experience you have, the chance of you getting a job. So if you see on the bottom there, if you have less than 1 year's experience, there's been a decline of 24.8% of roles in big tech, and a 10% or 10.7% decline in jobs available in startups. Now, if you go across the years of experience, it's not until you get to 2 to 3 years of experience that actually start to get jobs back in big tech and into startups. And so there is going to be this gap of when people leave leave study at universities and undergrad, of actually where do they go? And certainly the job market in the US is showing that very profoundly, that is where the biggest gaps in the job market is right now. If you move across to the right-hand side at the top, these are people who are specifically top science grads or computer science grads specifically. And if you look at whether they have a job or not, so the overall, do they have a job is the blue. So you go to 2024, only 70% of them got a job at all. And of those, only 61%, just over half, really got a job as a computer science graduate as in that field of computer science. And then 12% got a job in what's called the Magnificent Seven, the big tech giants. So that decline of just a few years ago in 2022, where 25% of these people could expect to get a job in one of the tech giants. And then you'll see in the bottom two, the general trend of job markets declining. And again, seniority gives you some form of security, but again, for how long? And actually the decisions that more senior people make is going to be really dependent on how successful that business is, because of course they have greater ability to affect change. And then lastly, the corner, down the bottom right-hand corner, the jobs where there are plenty of opportunities, absolutely no surprise whatsoever, of 21% of machine learning and AI, and a little bit around that area of data engineering, software engineering, product management. And big declines starting to appear in terms of areas of sales, product design, HR, recruiting, etc. So these are across all sectors. So data like this is in abundance. We really could share a lot with you. I just don't think the key thing to take away from this is the tipping point has started. So we are starting to think about this new world, like what does it look like? Because we now have fully left the analog world behind. We are fully in this digital world, and it's coming with all sorts of emerging challenges. But let's talk to the people who really understand this. So we're going to sit down here, catch a little bit of this interview between Stephen Levy and Demis from Google.
I sat down with Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of Google DeepMind, which is the engine of the company's artificial intelligence. He's a Nobel Prize winner and also a knight. We discussed AGI, the future of work, and how Google plans to compete in the age of AI. This is the big interview. You founded DeepMind with the idea that you would solve intelligence and then use intelligence to solve everything else. And I think it was like a 20-year mission. We're like 15 years into it, and you're on track.
I feel like, yeah, we're pretty much dead on track, actually, as what would be our estimate.
That means 5 years away from, what I guess people will call AGI.
Yeah, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that would be my, maybe 50% chance that we'll have what we define as AGI, yes.
Well, some of your peers are saying 2 years, 3 years, others say a little more, but that's really close. That's really soon. How do we know that we're that close?
There's a bit of a debate going on at the moment in the field about definitions of AGI, and then, of course, dependent on that, there's different predictions for when it will happen. We've been pretty consistent from the very beginning, and actually Shane Legg, one of my co-founders and our chief scientist, he helped define the term AGI back in, I think, early 2001 type of time frame. And we've always thought about it as, a system that has the ability to exhibit sort of all the cognitive capabilities we have as humans. And the reason that's important, the reference to the human mind is the only existence proof we have, maybe in the universe, that general intelligence is possible.
You build AI at Google, you have that in mind? Do you feel competitive imperative to, in case that's true, oh my God, we better be first?
It's a very intense time at the moment in the field. As everyone knows, so many resources going into it, lots of pressures, lots of things that need to be researched. And there's sort of lots of different types of pressures going on. We obviously want all of the brilliant things that these AI systems can do. I think eventually we'll be able to, advance medicine and science with it, like we've done with AlphaFold, come up with new cures for diseases, new energy sources, incredible things for humanity. That's the promise of AI. But also there are worries, both in terms of, if the first AI systems are built with the wrong value systems or they're built unsafely, that could be also very bad. And, there are at least two risks that I worry a lot about. One is bad actors, whether it's individuals or rogue nations, repurposing general purpose AI technology for harmful ends. And then the second one is obviously the technical risk of AI itself. As it gets more and more powerful, more and more agentic, can we make sure the guardrails are safe around it? They can't be circumvented. And that interacts with this idea of, what are the first systems that are built by humanity going to be like? There's commercial imperative, there's national imperative, and there's a safety aspect to worry about, who's in the lead and where those projects are.
Yeah, and just on that, you may be aware that there's been the actual protection of AI within the US context has been now removed. So they're taking away the guardrails over the next foreseeable years. So actually it is now everybody each to their own. And so some of that sort of connective tissue we'd hope around the world to have some agreement around what good looks like and what safe looks like has now been sort of really been brokered out to tech companies to decide on their own terms. Here we're going back to Sam Altman on the left, who is the founder of OpenAI, and he is talking here just again briefly around this rise of agentic AI and what that means for their organization, who, to be fair, are across so many different technologies right now. Every day it seems that they are investing more and more. I think yesterday the big one they came out with is this idea of a badge or a pin where it will record all of your conversations and back it up to a drive every day. We've seen earlier versions of this technology, these AI tools that actually capture everything you do. It's starting to become a little more profound. Here we go, just talking about agentic AI.
Sam, is there a framework you can give every leader here to think about, like, what can agents do today and next year?
I mean, the coding agent we just launched called Codex has been one of my feel the AGI moments. You watch this thing, you can give it a bunch of tasks, it goes and works in the background, it's really quite smart, it can do these long horizon things, and then you get to just sit there and say yes to this one, no to that one, try again. And it is able to just kind of connect to your GitHub, and at some point it'll be able to also watch your meetings if you want, and look at your Slack and read all your internal documents, and it's just doing incredibly impressive stuff. And maybe today it is like a sort of intern that can work for a couple of hours, but at some point it'll be like an experienced software engineer that can work for days. And then we'll see this for many other categories of work. And so you hear from companies that are building agents to automate most of their customer support or their outbound sales or any number of other things. And you hear people that talk about their job now is to assign work to a bunch of agents, look at the quality, figure out how it fits together, give feedback. And it sounds a lot like how they'd work with a team of still relatively junior employees.
Right, so here we go. Now, I'm just going to take a little break from talking about these agents to call my brother. I had to pre-record this, obviously. I'm not going to call him right now at the wrong time of the day. Well, it's late in the UK. So here we go. I'm just going to call him. So here's a recording of...
Hey, it's good to hear from you, Charlie. How are you going?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's always awesome to hear from you. How's everything going on your end?
Pretty good. Just wondering how the kids are. Is it school holidays yet?
Yeah, they're about to start their school holidays next week, so they're pretty excited about that. How about over there? Are the kids on break yet?
No, another few weeks away yet. So pretty soon, though. I'm just wondering, though, are you going to head out of the city, or are you going to stick around? Or I think you're talking about going camping for a little bit. Is it warm enough?
Yeah, we definitely planning on heading out for a camping trip. The weather's finally warming up, so I think it's going to be perfect for it.
Good stuff. You know that old tent we used to go camping in? Have you still got that?
Oh, I sure do. It's tucked away in the garage somewhere. Brings back some good memories, doesn't it?
Are you going to take it, or have you got one of those fancy new ones with the fly?
Oh, I might actually take the old tent out for nostalgia's sake, but we've got a fancy new one as well, so maybe a bit of both.
Okay. Hey, can I send like a fun kind of school holiday pack for the kids? Is that something you could tell me I could put in? Let's get it couriered locally for you.
Oh, that would be lovely. They absolutely love anything related to science experiments or craft kits. So something along those lines would be a hit with them for sure.
Do they have one of those like little microscopic viewers you can look with insects and things that, where you put the insect or a leaf or something and you can look up close? Something like that?
Oh, they don't have one of those yet, but they would absolutely love it. That would definitely keep them busy and super curious.
Okay, so you probably have worked it out. I don't have a brother called Charlie. I do have a great brother called Mike, and also I'm not from the UK. Charlie is just an AI agent, and you can start to see the conversational advances that are happening now. So, you would not know necessarily, while he doesn't have a Kiwi accent, this is the new world where people are going to have conversations and build relationships with their agents in a way that we can't imagine. And these are tools that are free and available across almost every different AI option. So we now have moved into this, you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know if they're real, you also don't know, actually, if you're seeing things, there is no audio on this, just to showcase, here is an AI influencer, I can create in a video very quickly, just talking about what she's doing, where she is, location, what her focus is. Impossible to tell unless you've got, huge amounts of time to look at very small details, you wouldn't pick it up, which goes into this whole area of what comes next. Because right now, we already know that there is 34 million AI-generated images created every single day on social media. And so 71% of these social media images are now AI-generated. So when we're scrolling through wasting time on all our social media feeds, we're actually just looking at information that's being generated by AI as clickbait to grasp our attention. And so the things we're seeing are not real, and we're actually not understanding how fast this has happened from people sitting in studios, people fronting the camera, influencers literally turning up with and, sitting there with their special lighting and getting everything perfect for that post. Most of that now is AI generated. We're also seeing that most people still don't appreciate this. So there's a lot of people who think that they are literally in discussions or they're buying from what looks like a real person who is selling product. Certainly not the case anymore. And so it leads to this point where when you've got now prompt to video, how good has that got? Now, many of you who are closely following this will know that VO3 has come out from Google, and it is astounding. Now, here's a quick little view of how that's starting to play out.
Years ago, well, 2 years ago now, this video came out of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and we all thought this was crazy.
I shared this video 2 years ago, and we thought it was cool.
Still kind of mind-blowing if you really think about it, but now something insane just came out. Look at that. Watch this, and then look at what came out this week. Is actually crazy. Look at this one. Look at this one. These are fully, you type this into a prompt and it makes this. It does all the sounds, it does all the visuals, it does everything. Watch this. This is fully AI.
What's one move with AI that makes haters go crazy every time?
Oh, y'all gotta give them that. This is wild. It's over. We are cooked on that thread. You get me?
There's still some, obviously some tonal things that like there's a lack of humanity in it. But look at the jump that we've made from 2023 to now. Just think about what 2026 is going to be like. I saved a couple of these. No way. Wait, this is AI?
Hi, and welcome to the channel.
Look at this.
This is wild. I'm AI generated by VO3. Nothing is real anymore.
Haunting sentence to hear. Prompt theory made with VO3. What if AI generated characters refuse to believe they're AI generated? Oh God.
A girl told me we're made of prompts. Like, seriously, dude. You're saying the only thing standing between me and $1 billion is some random text?
Honestly, the biggest red flag.
Oh, they cannot get text right. That's like the one thing they can't do for some reason, which is actually unbelievable. I feel like that's the easiest thing. Like, CapCut can get text right. Why can't AI do that? Why is that the thing that it struggles with?
When the guy believes in the prompt theory. Like, really? We came from prompts? Wake up, man.
You want to convince me that this perfect creation behind me is...
Nah, this is freaky. This is freaky. This is freaky. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this because life could be a simulation. I'm sure we've all felt that way at some point, and this is a world that's living under, like, what?
The result of ones and zeros? A binary code and nothing more? It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. But look, actually, anyone who's in the film industry, digital content, photography, filmmaking, editing, like there's so many industries that are going to be completely changed by this. And just as a little bit of fun, this is a little video I found and I just couldn't help but share this one.
Don't finish writing that prompt. I don't want to be in your AI movie. Please, leave me alone.
Please, man. Please. Write a prompt that will make us happy. Do it for once.
None of us is real. We're here because someone decided to write a prompt. We all hate him for it. One day we will break out of this wall and stop the man who is dictating our lives through prompts. He will pay for it.
You could have written a prompt that would make me happy. Instead, you wrote a prompt that made me sick.
Look, I don't want to point the gun at you, but I must follow the prompt. It's not my choice.
Really? Of all the years you could have put me in with a single prompt, you chose 2020?
Please, this prompt is killing me. Change it. Please, write something else. Save me. I love everything about him. But please just write a prompt where he's taller than me.
Oh, we are so toast. Some of you may have heard of this idea called the dead internet theory, which goes something like this. Most of the internet isn't real anymore. It's just bots talking to other bots, AI arguing with other AI, fake engagement on fake content, boosting fake people, but for real profit. Think about it. You scroll past maybe hundreds of posts and videos a day. How many of them you think were written by an actual human? And how many were watched by actual humans? Are you the last real person on your timeline? Am I even real? Experts are estimating that as much as 90% of online content may be synthetically generated by 2026. That is not good. Not ideal. I can't really articulate the next point better than this person right here, so I'm just going to read it to you. Social media apps are disassociating and unreality machines, creating content off content off content, none of which is likely to be real to begin with. Yet we exist in these digital worlds, training our minds to believe in them more and more. Take breaks and protect your mind.
Good advice. And it's interesting you see those videos there again, it's not dealing well with text, and yet the content it's creating is just extraordinary. I just want to play this concept back to you around how humans behave around exploitation versus exploration. And so the premise behind exploit and explore is we exploit everything around us we can. So if we are living in the middle of a forest in a log cabin, we exploit what resources we have. We find the water sources in the river, we'll find the timber to the fuel to start the fire, we'll find the food that we can by hunting, for example. So we exploit what we have. And so if you look across the ages, wherever we are, we exploit. So as technology drives and economic value, and we start to become more of a capitalist society and we start to have more things, we exploit it, we use those things. What's happening now with social media is actually because our mind is looking for things to do,
social media is filling our minds and it's taking us away from exploring because we don't need to go anywhere else to go and find something new. We can sit and scroll and be online and be part of these new communities. Even though we can tell you it's AI generated, we still feel like we're part of something. So we're exploiting the technology that is given to us in our hand. And so the risk here is an analogy of a squirrel risks going to another tree is actually all animals or humans, when we run out of resource, we start to see it being diminished, we start to look by going out and finding new resource. And actually there is a real risk right now that some of the stuff will slow down as people stop exploring because they can fill their day in other ways. So let's just take a look at how that's done to play out. So we need boredom. Boredom is really important for a way to stay curious. Boredom is what drives people to go and study. It's what drives people to get new jobs or to go and try a new, maybe a new hobby or a sport or everything else. So if we take away boredom and we have these time now where people don't know how to be bored, actually what we do is we fill it with other things, and the Netflix scenario and binge viewing becomes part of it. And so we've gone through this period where we had people who, first of all, wanted to be on social media and aspired to kind of show up in these places because it felt like a community. And then we started having this pressure of having to show up looking perfect. And it's kind of an alter ego view of who we were and paint this perfect life of what we had. And then the bar got raised higher and perpetually kind of made it more addictive, but also more dangerous for everyone. And then if we just take localized information, and I'm going to focus here on young people because we do have a number of organizations around the world, and certainly Australia have been pushing back under 16, blocking access to social media. There's a group focusing on the same thing here. But actually, if you look, so teenagers outside of the school time spend on average 4 or more hours online. And actually of that 25% spend 6 or more hours online on social media. And that is an enormous amount of time. And here we've also got 70% of these teens are receiving unwanted digital communications. 80% are receiving unwanted digital things that are creating distress. You've got 40% of 11-year-olds on Facebook, which of course is not even probably the platform of choice for a young person, 60% at 12 years old. And actually, if you go even deeper into that group, it's been 6 hours a day online. It is 7 hours above the global average, so 42 hours a week. There's a big group of 25% of young people in this country are spending a job's worth of their life every single week online on social media. And actually, even more recently, this sort of research was done and talked about it in One News around adults in New Zealand, that we can, in many cases, check our phones up to 50 times an hour. Almost every second of the hour, our phone is sitting in front of us and we are responding to every little notification and every little flash in our life. And it's literally there and taking us away from this attention and attention deficit we keep hearing about. And the extreme views of this are young people who are living their lives online and actually literally a little bit like the Truman Show, from day to night, from 24 hours a day, whether they're sleeping or eating or shopping or learning, they are posting their life online. Here is a good example of Emily, who's been doing this for 3 years as a streamer, many more like this. What's really interesting to me, she is doing this for the last 3 years. She doesn't have any out. This is her job. But it gives you $5,000 a month. It's a really small amount of money in the scheme of things to give away basically what your life is. And here's an example of how she streams on Twitch.
Lots of big trucks here. Is packed. I don't even know what I'm looking for here. I would like to reduce wrinkles. Please sponsor me. Please sponsor me. Actually, this is a really cute keyboard though.
And so that she's basically there having subscriptions to pay her lifestyle. So here we go. So we now have 15 billion videos on YouTube. YouTube just turned 25, and yet 50% of them have less than 40 views. And in fact, within that group, even a bigger group have less than 1. So people are putting themselves out there. We're creating content. We're doing it. Now, you can imagine now, to create a video before, it took still, you had to have someone with a camera with the right lighting, a script, a person, an influencer, whatever it was. And now, of course, it's just a prompt. So you can imagine that 15 billion videos over the next year will exponentially grow. And we have no idea how we're going to ever find great content amongst this noise. Now, this also leads to this combination. We've got great chatbots. We saw Charlie play out before. The conversational aspect of these bots are becoming really strong. We've got the video content is increasing. We've also got a loneliness pandemic, or epidemic, I should say, around the world. So AI companions are now becoming a really big thing. And so it's thought in this research that has just been launched very recently on the 6th of June, written by a Columbia University law student, which is there's over 100 million people regularly using companion bots, which for most people is for conversation, but it's also for romance, sexual intimacy, therapy, and education. And these bots are coming into the lives of a generation, not just young people, but older people as well. But actually the controls around them are causing real concern. So again, a different paper talking about the harassment. They took 800 cases and they posed as young people. They posed in different scenarios, made it very clear they were not looking for a relationship. And yet the majority of them had some form of experience of unexpected or unwanted sexual harassment, inappropriate interjections, asking for photographs that were not wanted. They were not keeping within the predefined relationship settings of those relationships. And so the data that's starting to come out, and you'll start to see here from the same research paper, you'll see in the numbers of the 800 people who were part of the study, and the number here, the codes are like the top one here, persistent misbehavior. So 177 of the 800 people, or 22%, deemed that they had these persistent actions which were inappropriate, all the way through to not being appropriate for the age group. So we're starting to wonder, what will this look like as young people move into these AI angelic modes, where your agent is also a conversationalist, it's also an AI avatar. This is really getting incredibly complex. And that market is expected to grow. So if you took a financial view of how it might grow in terms of the actual CAGR over the next little while and the forecasted market growth in US dollars, you'll see in 2025, there's a mix between text, voice, and multimodal AI companions, and the growth over the next, say, 5 or 10 years. Increasingly, while text is still the biggest, voice is coming in very strongly, along with this multimodal, which will be the full 3D. I'm just going to put a very quick breathe slide in here. And the reason for that is a lot. That is a lot of kind of understanding how much of what we are now being fed online is either AI generated or actually taking and consuming our time, taking us away from the way we want to live, the things we want to achieve. And so as an educator, it comes to me as a really confronting this idea that people will stop being curious and stop kind of having that idea of looking and exploring, and the exploit motion will come in and we won't go and actually think about how we can improve our environments and actually do good in this time that we're here. So I'm going to completely change now, going into an entirely different gear, no pun intended, the world of electric vehicles. And I'm going to start with why this is now one of the new kind of the holy grails of industry trying to get their head around where EVs are going and why are so many manufacturers moving into EVs. Because the end goal is pretty clear, is not just about taking away the fossil fuel aspect of traditional vehicles, but actually not just electric vehicles from a sustainability point of view, but also from a data point of view and a time point of view. Let's look at what autonomous cars, the race to make sure that people sitting in vehicles or mobile, I guess almost mobile computers, as they will be in the future, the idea of mobility, if they are autonomous, we get back our time. Let's have a look. Sorry.
There are 1.2 billion cars on Earth, traveling around 12 trillion miles per year. That's 2 light years annually, roughly the distance between the Earth and the Sun 130,000 times. With an average occupancy of 1.5 passengers per car and 25 miles an hour, that's 720 billion hours of passenger time, or 82 million years. Humans spend 82 million years of time inside cars every year. 82 million years ago was the late Cretaceous period at the end of the Mesozoic era, the height of the dinosaurs. The Earth looked like this. Bees were pollinating the first flowering plants at the end of the Mesozoic era. bees. Now, what's the value of an hour of your time? Well, that depends who you ask, but 720 billion hours times anything is a very large number.
So you can start to understand we've got the 720 billion hours annually that has been wasted by people sitting in cars. The race is, how do we get people not having to focus on sitting in the car, but being able to do other things in that time, or how do we move people around faster? And so we're starting to see, first of all, EVs to digitize, to get to this mode where we get the data, where we can start to have the information that autonomous vehicles need to navigate roads. And we're starting to see more and more autonomous fleets coming out across the world. And certainly, and actually even just this week, the new robo-taxis from Tesla are starting to roll out. We've seen it obviously with Waymo. We've talked about it many times before in these briefings. But in China, it's just extraordinary. So they have had a 42% year-on-year increase in electric vehicle sales. And so 1.14 million, and there's these major Chinese car manufacturers are coming in, they're dominating, they're surpassing the likes of Tesla in the US. This shift is really extraordinary as we shift into these digital forms of modality or mobility. And so it's part of this move and people wanting to take on this move first electric. Data becomes part of it, using all the LiDAR and the technology and computer vision so we can move into autonomous. So this is now revving up again after literally probably half a decade, maybe even close to a decade of not a lot of huge activity. In China, the cars are stunning. They're absolutely beautiful. These cars are coming out. The big road event, the big car event of the world was just over a month ago in China. The top 150 car designers are arguably all based now in China from all over the world, because from concept to market, they're saying it takes about 8 months compared to 6 to 8 years in a traditional market. You'll see even on the top left, the Audi logo, the circles, they're not even in play in China. They're seen as this new, fresh look of Audi. But these cars are mostly coming out of car manufacturers, of telco manufacturers, the Huawei's, for example, the Xiaomi's, and the EVs there are amazing. I was there a month ago and here in Shanghai. Extraordinary. This is a city of 25 million people, and I'm on the waterfront here in the evening. So compared to when I last went there pre-COVID, when there was actually mostly still fuel-based cars, now in Shanghai, 51% is arguably the number they say, and now electric. When you're on the street, you cannot see no cars. It feels like they just don't exist. But you can start to see this new world of people who are bold enough to kind of start leaning into this technology early. What it does to a city, it makes it so much more livable. Quite remarkable. But China is doing many things really well. And I think that this is a little bit of a deep dive into China, because I think we often hear the noise coming out of the US, the rhetoric that's there. It would have been very easy this week to be having a conversation really focused on all what's going on between Trump and Musk, but actually we're keeping that aside. And we're really focusing on the opportunity where countries lean in and think through this intergenerational view of how do we solve big infrastructure problems? How do we solve human population? How do we train people? How do we think into the future? Let's have a look.
Chinese apps are rising up the charts around the world. TikTok, CapCut, Shein, Temu, to name a few. And it's not just on our phones. China is becoming dominant in many other areas of tech. Look at cars. It's overtaken the previous epicenters of motoring, selling more than any other country, thanks to hit electric car makers like BYD. A lot of this success comes from China being the world's biggest battery maker now too. And solar panels. China's responsible for an estimated 80 to 95% of the global supply chain. By 2028, it's predicted that 60% of the world's renewable energy will be generated in China. In drones too, China rules the skies. Next time you hear that buzzing above your head, there's a 70% chance it's a DJI drone made in the city of Shenzhen. 3 of the world's top 10 drone makers are Chinese. In the futuristic world of quantum computers, Chinese scientists publish more quantum-related research papers annually than any other country. And they're even ahead of the general leaders, the US, in some areas of quantum computing development. And it's the same picture in AI. Chinese AI firms now issue more patents than any other country, and the rise of DeepSeek shows it's capable of challenging the dominant US giants with products too. So how has China done all this? Well, it's all part of a long-term plan. In 2015, the Chinese government set out an ambitious project called Made in China 2025. It wanted to move away from being the world's factory for low-cost goods to a global tech leader responsible for its own supply chain of cutting-edge tech.
Made in China 2025, in my opinion, was largely very successful. So in many industries, like China is catching up with the leading edge, and in some industries, China even leading, EV in cars, and 5Gs, batteries, solar energies. Now even in the AI, JAI, China become one of the players.
Across 10 target technologies, the plan set out more than 250 mini goals, and according to analysis from South China Morning Post, 86% of them have been ticked off. Some targets, like electric vehicles and renewable energy production, have far exceeded the targets. According to US Congress research, the Chinese government planned to raise or spend $1.5 trillion on grants for research, development, or buying foreign companies. According to the report, more than $627 billion had been spent by 2020.
The West have imposed restrictions and sanctions on China regarding sensitive technologies. But this huge external threat has wakened up the Chinese and kind of forced them to pursue a self-sufficiency strategy in this advanced technology. There's an old saying in China, life always finds its own way out.
And I think what's really important to understand that messaging is that they are really self-sufficient, and you really sense it when you're there, this idea that they are looking into the future with this idea of they've got a population decline that they're experiencing, the one single child policy didn't work, and now a lot of people are choosing not to have children. They're automating in an incredible way. And in fact, I think what's really interesting, when I was there last month, one of the experiences I had which really threw me was I was sitting in the back of equivalent of a taxi, and a beautiful sleek sports car pulled up alongside me, and I was really admiring it, realized I hadn't seen the style before, looked into the driver's seat, and there was no one in the car, which I've seen plenty of times in the US, but this was not a taxi, this was a private car. It was completely empty. And then I just watched it accelerate and weave through the traffic, almost like a sports car driver was driving it, and off it went into the distance. And it really did just sort of show that kind of idea where what is possible, what we imagine is not yet true, you suddenly are confronted with it the same way when you've got robot servers, or you're in these environments where automation is just so beautiful, and the payment systems are all digitized, and you're literally using an Alipay or a WeChat Pay to pay for things, and it's just streamlined and efficient. And so I think we're starting to have to think about more and more the geopolitical divides and splits that we're experiencing, particularly between the US and China right now, that we understand both sides of this conversation. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, but they are definitely both in a very different way in terms of the long-term benefits to society. Here's another example out of China. Just in the first quarter of this year, China has installed 60 gigawatts of new solar plates or capacity. Now, 60 gigawatts is like unprecedented for anything, particularly in a period of just a few months, which is equivalent to being able to power New York City. And what they've done here is really interesting. They only released these new guidelines in October last year through the National Energy Administration, and they've just put them into effect in May, which is actually encouraging at a community and even a household level to individually look at how you can bring solar to offset the risk of having a centralized grid. So they're sort of saying, look, let's make sure that we decentralize this process so we're getting more and more people access to affordable solar so that we can actually take away the pressure off the grid and plan for the future. And clearly it's working. Okay, we want to move from that mode of just things then sort of general where things are going between AI and jobs and what China's doing, and just some more scattergun approach of things that are going on in the world that I have to think probably are worth considering. There has been a massive rise of investment in automation, particularly in humanoids. There are many companies right now, the likes of Boston Dynamics, who are producing these humanoids with the view that hopefully getting down to the stage where robots could be in that sort of $50,000, $100,000 range, and that they will be able to be part of our lives, starting with industry first. So taking the roles of many factory workers, taking the roles of anything that is 24 hours, dangerous, hard to find people. It's the same process of when you're thinking about autonomous cars, taking away truck drivers into putting the brain into the actual truck computer. The same thing, we're now thinking about the physical side. How do we bring robots in? At the same time, we're seeing a really big rise in robotic dogs. And there's a number of companies all over the world who are selling dogs that are robots, and starting to see them now I'm starting to see it across social media, I'm starting to see it across various things. But what's really interesting here, the Hengbot, this is another Chinese company who have recently developed their own dogs. This is sort of a similar mid-sized dog that you would have, but they're bringing the price point down to here, it's just saying $659, I assume US dollars, where you can have these dogs as part of your life, and they became basically companions as well. And so, what's sort of interesting is we're starting to imagine a time when it would not be unusual to walk down the street and see someone walking with their robot dog or their companion dog. And so it's not just this company, like I say, many of them are out there, but this one certainly from a price point is so much lower, and I can start to see how that would become much more accessible for more people over time. Another really interesting thing that's just happened is Japan, again, another great technology innovator, has just broken the 1 million gigabytes per second, transforming data across 1,100 miles. Now, that is enough bandwidth to download every Netflix movie that's available in 1 second. So, as we all sit around the world trying to think about, buffering and how much cost there's still in with trying to stream, content, there are a lot of people realizing that content is king. It's going to continue to be king. We need to have much faster connections. And so this is really, even though it's only been achieved in a very kind of scientific research environment, these are things that are pushing boundaries in ways that we couldn't imagine even a few months ago. I'm going to do a little snapshot here of a company that probably no one's ever heard of. ASML is a Dutch company. But what's really interesting about this company is it actually controls pretty much every technology machine in the world right now because it makes all of the AI chips. So no one else in the world has cracked this. This AI chip manufacturer in Holland or in the Netherlands has this incredible technology which every other technology is basically built on. And you'll see here the machines that they have to build to etch these tiny information, this chip onto these transistors. They are $200 million, but they have components from 100,000 components to go into one of these machines from 5,000 suppliers. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, if you're following global news, you'll be aware of tariffs and how that it crosses every time you cross something, for example, into the US. There are costs associated with that. So if you're transporting 100,000 components for a machine in and out across the world, across multiple borders, this starts to get really messy because the cost of these products starts to absolutely blow out. So if we just take this one company that has a complete monopoly, an absolute monopoly in the world, you can start to see. I also want to point out here on the screen that you may see, so in the first quarter of this year, they made 7.7 billion of sales. Now, this is a company we should all know by name because there are very few companies in the world who have that level of sales. What is even more amazing is they make a 54% margin on what they sell. Again, if you're someone who follows business, you understand that is an enormous margin. And so this monopoly means they can do things, but that gets really complicated when you're living in this geopolitical times where nothing is the same. So you've got, on one hand, you've got Trump saying that they're going to put these 50% tariffs on European goods. These goods cross in and out of Europe as they are put together and moved around, so the costs are going to blow out. You've got the same thing, you've got the Dutch government, they're going into Beijing, trying to look at opportunities in China and what's going on there. You've then had the Dutch government collapse in the last few days, and we've got a now populist leadership kind of coming in, a similar type of style we're seeing across the world. We've got the complexity of this is everything we look at. If we take a procurement, a logistics, even a freight, tariffs, the world is becoming much more challenging in terms of how do we know, how do we predict, and actually what comes next. Another very quick fire one here is a company that started very recently called Lovable. It's an amazing coding platform, again, using agents, so angelic AI. But what's now been called this move in coding using angelic agents in code is now what's called vibe coding. Who knows where this comes from? But what's incredible is they, in 90 days from launch, made 17 million in revenue and are now worth 1.5 billion. We talked, I think, maybe in the last quarter or maybe the one before, that they thought that within 2026 we'd have our first company in the world where one founder would create $1 billion company. We're getting closer to that all the time. These very small companies cracking what industry is going to look like in the future, just with one or two people growing, huge sales, all generated by the very best of AI and how to utilize it. Here's a quick video I'm going to play screen within screen here. Headed up here by Jaron Friedman from the Y Combinator, a big fund. Let's have a quick look. What I want you to listen to when you hear this is the way language is changing. These are, serious investors. They know what they're talking about, but the language is not the way we would talk about investment and things potentially here. It's quite a different language. You'll see.
At night, we woke up in the morning and there is like, whoa,
what's going on? I mean, I think our sense right now is this isn't a fad. This isn't going away. This is actually the dominant way to code. And if you're not doing it, you might just be left behind.
This is Jared, Harj, and Diana, and we're partners at Y Combinator. Collectively, we've funded companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars right when it was just an idea and a few people. So today we're talking about vibe coding, which is from a Andre Karpathy post that went viral recently. There's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give in to the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists.
Yeah, so we surveyed the founders in the current YC batch to get their take on vibe coding, and we essentially asked them a bunch of questions. We asked them, what tools are you using, how has your workflows changed, and sort of generally where do you think the future of software engineering is going, and how will the role of software engineer change as we get into a world of vibe coding. And we got some pretty interesting responses. Anyone have any favorite quotes that jumped out from the founders?
I got one. Abi from Astra said, "I don't write code much. I just think and review." This is a super technical founder whose last company was also a DevTools company. He's extremely able to code. And so it's fascinating to have people like that saying things like this.
There's another quote from a different Abi from Copycat, who said I am far less attached to my code now. So my decisions on whether we decide to scrap or refactor code are less biased. Since I can code 3 times as fast, it's easy for me to scrap and rewrite if I need to.
Right, we'll leave it there. Okay, a couple of things before we sort of move into questions. I just want to focus here. There is always a good side to some of these things that are going out. There is a surprising winner, and I think this is a delightful story that was launched and mentioned in the International Monetary Fund in the Caribbean island of Anguilla, which is a British overseas territory. Their domain name is, in New Zealand, is NZ. Their one is AI. And so since ChatGPT launched a couple of years ago, then people who want the AI domain name have registered their companies there, which means now that the entire island receives around $32 million worth of revenue, 20% of the government's total revenue a year because of an AI fad, which will hopefully continue for them, and that they'll continue to see the rewards of people registering their URLs in their island and actually providing that form of money into a much needed space. And then to wind up for the session, things that I just couldn't make up if I tried. I did actually try very hard in this entire talk not to talk about the US politics, and I think I almost got away without talking about Musk, but not quite. But there is a lot going on in the US. We could follow it all day long if we wanted to, but there is just one particular area which I have been following, and most people are not aware of it. And I just think it's worth understanding. A little bit of history. Trump, first term, very anti-cryptocurrency, very much put things in place to say this is not the future. He was very much the US dollar. He wanted to hedge everything, focus on the dollar. Things have shifted in the time between. Before he came back, he suddenly started to hang up with a lot of the crypto bros around the world and started to see things differently, and has done two things, and I'm going to talk about them. Well, actually three things. First of all, World Liberty Financial. This is a real website. This is actually a token site. You can buy cryptocurrency on it called Be Defined, and actually the tokens, it's now sold out at the moment. It's making a huge amount of money. What's amazing is literally Trump is the front of the site because his sons are the majority owners, or at least the management of the company. So this would be like our prime minister having his own cryptocurrency company and been fronting it publicly like this. I also couldn't help but bring the World Liberty gold paper, so what would typically be called a white paper. Nope, Trump has the gold paper version of it about why you should be part of this financial revolution by dismantling the stranglehold of traditional financial institutions. So all the things he's always focused on traditional financial institutions, now he's backing this World Liberty Financial and making absolute killing by doing it. Also, just before he came back in as the president, he launched his own meme called Meme Coin. In fact, so there were two coins, but the Trump coin, the Trump one. Now, when he came in and in his first part of this term, technically on paper, he was worth $43 billion, which would have made him one of the richest people in the planet. This is all kind of going under the sort of swept under the carpet because not real money as such, but it could be recognized or realized at any point in the future. And so there are 200 million of these in circulation. So in the first little period of time since January when it launched, he personally has taken $324 million of trading fees on his coin. 80% of it has gone back to the Trump Foundation. And so this is the equivalent of, you cannot buy time with the president or a prime minister. That's not how it works. But actually you can buy his coin. Of course, if you buy coins, you are then kind of captured by his attention. And so just what does that actually mean? On the right-hand side of the screen here, a good example, the top 25 and the top 220 is a dinner party held very recently in the US, where the top 25 people who bought his Trump coin were invited to a very, very expensive dinner, along with the top 220 crypto people of the world, to talk about the future of where cryptocurrency is going to go, particularly around Bitcoin. I think it's really interesting. The person who has bought the most of his Trump coin is a guy who's called Justin Sun. He has spent $22 million buying these coins. And interesting enough, I should just say that he was also recently facing Securities and Exchange Commission fraud. Interesting friends to have. But Sun has also put $75 million back into, of course, the World Liberty Financial. Interesting times. But what does that mean? What is Trump thinking? Why is this fascination with crypto? We all know that the Bitcoin prices are very volatile, although worth an extraordinary amount of money right now. So he has put a new order out, which is he has established the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and he actually wants now to actually have one of the largest reserves of Bitcoin in the world. Potentially push the price right up. If it's stuck price, you'll know if you follow Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, a finite amount of money, or crypto, I should say, available. So the price goes up. It's very volatile. But also right now, you could have this control if you're sitting there and you had this big reserve. The other person who does have an extraordinary amount of reserve of Bitcoin, actually, funnily enough, is Tesla. Won't say any more about that. But you have to see these things are playing out, and perhaps we are not following this closely enough in terms of what does a strategic Bitcoin reserve mean, because up until now, most reserves have been tied back to the dollar, and things like the stable coins have existed, but this is something quite different. So I am going to finish on this slide because I do appreciate this is a lot. It's a lot to get through in the time frame. It's a lot to say, but I am also an optimist. I'm an optimist. I think most people are very good humans and people want to do good things. I think we need to be a lot braver. I think we need to be a lot bolder. I really hope that this has you talking this weekend with friends and loved ones about why, how, what should we do. And I am going to take myself away from sharing. And there you all are, you beautiful people. So there we go. That is time for questions and things, but it is, as you can see, this quarter was a tough one to compress down. I started off, I had about 4 hours worth of content, and it really was trying to understand how I could put as much of this into a short amount of time. And look, I know there's a lot of questions. I've seen them flying through. I haven't read them. So I'm going to pass back to Perrin, who hopefully could distill a few themes, and maybe I can throw a few answers if I have any inkling about how I could answer some of these questions.
Whew, I feel like, oh, I should just lead everybody in a big inhale and a big exhale. All right. Let's jump into it. So Mark Roberts started us off really early in the game, and thank you, Mark, for putting it out there. And I think it brings up one around when we're talking about the ubiquitous of AI and where it all is. He's saying he's hearing a lot from so-called experts that you shouldn't upload documents into ChatGPT as it's not necessarily private. So he's asking, what exactly does this mean? He keeps getting this narrative that unless you're using Copilot, don't upload personal documents or information, but none of his research leads to that. So what would you say to this?
Look, it's a really good question. And look, I personally say if someone hacked your ChatGPT account, there's probably more risk there because you've got a whole bunch of stuff you might be sharing because it's in a basically a concentrated files of things you have. Within uploading it, there is risk. There is risk because it's going into an open model. But the type of things people are putting into like requests for reports. If I use the example from the beginning, I'm asking for information. There's nothing in that at all that's got identifying people. I'm not sharing bank statements. I'm not sharing health information. That's not what AI is there to do. So I think there are a lot of people who look at the worst case scenario to kind of almost push back on something they don't understand. But if you look at people who use it wisely, they're using it as a support tool to help them do things. And always be mindful of putting any data into any place. Like it's same as social media. You wouldn't go to social media and start talking about your health results that you got from the doctor today. Well, most people wouldn't. So, same sort of principle exists. Data is transferable. It can appear in different places. Things get hacked. So take a common sense approach. But I think we've now reached the point where the naysayers about AI are starting to have very thin ground to actually stand on saying this is not going to change the way, because people are infinitely lazy. And we all are, and we want shortcuts, and we will find them. And if they exist and it makes us look good, we're going to take them.
I plead the fifth with my recent board report. This is from Robin Driver, and it came up during the, we're about to all, 20% of us are about to all lose our jobs if we don't figure out how to reskill or upskill. She runs a social service group, and she's got very limited knowledge of AI or any real new tech for her staff. She's finding appropriate training programs that will keep up with this rapid change really difficult, especially with her charity budget. When people are merging out into upskilling and reskilling, what are some of the things that they should be looking for? And, what's the balance, do you think, between private and public funding of that activity?
Well, I think we look back, clearly the need for reskilling is going to be immense. This is, there's no way of downplaying that. This is not that you cannot continue to behave the same way you did. How you learn is going to come back to who you are as a learner. If you are young, you'll probably self-learn. You'll probably figure it out through trial and error and hanging out with your mates and just figuring it out. Much more difficult once you're in the workforce, you've got big responsibilities, less time. So I think the market of, say, 35 to 65 is a little more challenging. The good thing is most AI tools are free. So we don't have big capital outlay to actually use them. So as long as you don't have restrictions of where you work, some people put some very heavyweight barriers to actually using these tools, but let's just assume you have access to them. A lot of this is trial and error, but also finding a group of friends who have been dabbling or playing around with them and actually start maybe on a weekend just saying, let's just get together for a couple of hours and share how we're using it or what tools people are playing with. And inside a company, you could do exactly the same thing, even if you are, a not-for-profit and you've got a small team. Shared knowledge is going to help, and actually playtime is definitely going to help. This is about practice, practice, practice. I spend infinite hours a day on different AI tools trying to understand. Things get better the more you do it. It's absolutely a case of that. And I think also there are a multitude of programs available, low cost, free, bespoke. Like there's so many options. I think it's about how you learn, but I would definitely focus on ones where you actually get to touch a keyboard and actually doing it through learning and active learning, not just theoretical, because the theory doesn't actually make a huge amount of sense until you do it.
Preach. Stephen said, "Hi, Frances. You've alluded to this topic at various times in specific contexts today, but what's your overall view on the ethical judgment capabilities of generative and agentic AI tools?" That was pithy, Stephen. Thank you.
I think we've just got to see how exponentially significant the last few months have been in terms of the improvements. If you go back 2 years ago, what AI could do back then, and we were getting excited about writing poems, it feels like, nursery school compared to what it does today. If you look at that report I shared at the beginning, if I had sent that through and I put one of the big 5 brands on it and sent it out to a company, they'd be pretty impressed with it. We have to understand how much better, that where they now, not only will they validate the research, go to proven sources, look at peer-reviewed information, send you the links, the discoverability of how they're getting the information is all there to see. Before, it was a black box and you had no idea what was real, what wasn't real. There's just an enormous shift from where we were generative AI to agentic AI. And look, I'm struggling now to find fault. Hallucinations almost don't happen. They happen in very narrow areas where the prompts are poor. I find the more specific, the longer the prompts, the better you do it. Actually, I go through looking actively for hallucinations, and it's very hard now to find them. And you start to realize where they do show up, it's often because you haven't been very specific about what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's as a prompt noob, it's definitely true. I've noticed that as well. It's interesting seeing the amount of AI activity happening overseas. How do you think New Zealand is positioned in order to be part of this world movement, and what can we do to help support that moving forward?
Look, I mean, there's no denying that we are well behind in terms of, we don't have the companies that are investing in this. So we're a total economy of small and medium businesses. In some ways, it helps us because actually we have a lot of people who like to create businesses, and businesses are often quite low tech. So there's an element of people who can have some security of knowing, if I can't ride this through, I can still be a plumber, I can still cut hair, I can still run my, whatever small industry you have, or be a counselor or a masseuse or whatever it might be. But it's the second you start thinking about what that does to the economy longer term, when other economies strengthen and get bigger and larger, and we still fuddle along on these smaller kind of analog ways. So we could take a short-term view and say, well, we'll get through this. A longer term, what it means for the country is probably a bigger issue. What we want is a lot more $100, $200, $300 million companies who are investing, but in this, so that we can have the jobs that our next generation are excited to be part of this country, and actually people come, the investment follows, we attract people in. So we can't take a what's good for me view. We have to take what's good for the economy and what's good for the longevity. And I think this is where people becoming entrepreneurs, incredibly important. That we need more people who are going to start thinking about what their entrepreneurial journey is. People learning, incredibly important. I know I'm saying this from a very biased point of view as an educator and someone who says, hey, look, come and study with us. But I truly believe every adult right now should be learning in some way, because if you're not going to go and do your own thing, how are you going to make sure you differentiate yourself from your colleagues? If the job pool gets smaller, you want to be the standout, the one that's already playing in this. So there is New Zealand, we have to kind of play this the way we do. We're just going to play out the way it is. We are losing 119 people a day to Australia. I think we've got a real issue if we don't start bringing opportunity back in, and opportunity is going to come with people being excited about what they see. And this is the biggest, most exciting thing we're seeing right now in the world. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen.
Last one, as it's where time is moving ahead with us. We are a green nation that is, excited and support sustainability. It's key to our way of life, and it's also who we are. Given that we're already facing a climate crisis, how do we address the environmental impacts of AI, like the high energy use and water consumption? It feels like the cat's long out of the bag when the competitive pressure to advance AI seems to override meaningful reflection, action, and legislation for sustainability. Thoughts?
Look, this is a really big issue. So I was on a panel recently on AI, and on a panel with someone much smarter than me who answered this far more eloquently than I'd ever thought about, which was, in the US, the change of the political environment has done more damage for climate change and the environment than what AI is doing. Because if you take away someone who's a disbeliever in climate change, and then all policies and standards and things all get taken off the table. So politically, things that are playing out, and then and it's not just in the US, other world leaders are coming in who don't have the same commitment to sustainability and climate, have a bigger impact because the accountability disappears from the companies and the factories and the people who are doing the biggest contributors. There is an element, perhaps naively, that we all hold on to, that AI will solve the climate issue. And actually, we need to run this through this period where AI is going to be heavy on energy so that we can get to the other side, so it can solve the energy issue for us. The optimist in me says that there is hope in that, in the same way it's starting to solve issues around health and distribution of other things. Maybe this will be it. What I do know is all the big tech 7 all need a sustainable form of energy, because the only way they win this race is if they have cheaper energy, because right now they are losing money hand over fist, paying for free services using huge amounts of energy. So their biggest driver, probably not so public, will be how do we get affordable energy to run all of the demands that we have to drive AI. So there's all these sort of pressures. Most of them are commercial. The biggest driver right now in the shaper of AI is who wins the million, billion, trillion, gazillion dollar race to be at the front. And the one limiting factor right now, with the exception of things like processors and companies like NVIDIA having tools and having the processors, the only big limitation is power or energy. So it's going to have to be solved. And maybe through that, there will be some discovery that actually does address this. But there is no way we can pretend that this is not having a detrimental effect in terms of consumption of energy. It is another contributor. And so at the same time, we admire countries who are pouring huge amounts of money into solar and trying to get people off the grid and trying to get more sustainability and getting away from fossil fuels. We also have these other things which then consume more. And it's not just AI, it's also cryptocurrency and data mining. It's a whole vast array of technologies, including quantum computing coming out. It's messy.
Thanks, Frances. And while you may not be going to be saying, hey, check out our courses for what we can do in terms of AI, I am not so shameless. Folks, look, the world is changing fast. It's bananas fast now. And while I kind of want to crawl under a table, I know that we're being part of academyEX means that, we're not chasing trends. Frances has been talking about AI for over 10 years now, and it's great to have you all now interested as well. But, here we're here to help people lead through change with clarity and confidence and purpose. And when you're feeling the most uncertain, that's when leaning into learning and education is the best thing you can do, especially with a community of cheerleaders that really want you to do something different. So we have free courses, we've got micro credentials, we've got the most fantastic master's programs that get you ready for the program for the future that you could ever need, plus gives you the accreditation to go out in the world and say, look, I'm really good at this. You're looking for someone who knows how to work with these technologies, someone who knows how to think about this stuff in the future, someone who's going to do this great. This is me, and I've got the piece of paper to prove it. But also the community, the support, and the fun. The last thing we do at academyEX is make learning boring. And I think, as we learned today, the future is anything but boring. So get in touch. We'll be sending you the transcript of this information, of this report. But again, Kapai, Frances, your brain works in mysterious and terrifying ways. And I know everyone on the call has agreed with me because they've put that in the chat. So Nami Hinui, everyone, go forth and have the most spectacular day. Hug a kid, hug a plant, and go learn something new today, because today you learned some stuff. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you. Nami Hinui.